After the successful operation against the Maduro regime in Venezuela, the Trump administration has turned its eyes to a few new targets, one of which happens to be our own allies. And it might actually be the dumbest international relations move Trump has made in either of his terms for a number of reasons. Greenland is a very strategically important country. Its airspace is critical for early warning ICBM detection coming from Western Russia, monitoring Russian naval movements in the Northern Atlantic and Arctic, which greatly improves our situational awareness and force management, and the Arctic trading routes are becoming more and more of a security consideration. That being said, we already take care of all that with our current dynamic in the country. We have Patuxent Air Base there and basically free reign over military operations in the country and Arctic more broadly. And it's not like the Danes are going to put up much of a fight if we want to conduct any sort of operation there. So how do any of the claims of the administration justify their desire to exert direct control over the territory? Although Trump has softened his rhetoric about the issue over the past few days at Davos, committing to not using force, which was obviously never a real threat, a lot of unnecessary damage to our European relationships have been done. And as critical as I am of Europe, they are important allies. NATO is actually a generally good thing, and because of this and the trade war over the summer, we're seeing historically close countries like Canada orienting themselves closer to China. None of this is worth whatever the administration thinks it will get from some deal with Denmark for things that we already largely have or could easily get access to. There are a few avenues of speculation as to why Trump and the administration have levied such strong rhetoric at Greenland, and again, it's totally unnecessary. The primary idea being that Trump is doing what Trump does, the art of the deal. He makes claims or offers that are over the top to push the boundaries of what is normal in the direction that he wants, to either make the terms of the normal deal more favorable to him or give the optics that he's compromising. If he starts by saying that we'll take Greenland by any means necessary, then the deal that is now being reported that maintains Danish control and Greenlandic autonomy seemed like a compromise on his part. He went from insinuating potential military force to a peaceful negotiation process. The problem with that and the Trump style of cooperation we've seen throughout his tenure is that that style of deal-making may work well in the business world, where posturing and financial gain is the name of the game, but it doesn't really work the same way in international relations without isolating yourself. America is the top dog, for sure, but we're not just billion-dollar businesses with products to sell. We're trillion-dollar nations who rely on each other for various things. And if the top dog acts like a boss looking out for his own personal interests, instead of a leader looking out for the interests of the group, then why wouldn't other nations seek out somebody else to lead them? And that's exactly what we're seeing, as we watched Canadian PM Mark Carney talk about closing ties with China, and China themselves taking advantage of the schism by posturing as the friendly new guy on the block. It's a pure ego trip, shown by Trump linking his drive to take control of Greenland to his failure to win the Nobel Peace Prize, saying that he no longer thought purely of peace, as the disagreement over the island also threatened to reignite a trade war with Europe and threw markets into chaos. Who cares about the Nobel Peace Prize? It's a meaningless award, and his obsession over it is just not a good look. Now I am very pro-America and believe that we could just about take on the world if we really needed to, but that doesn't mean that we should. Relationships are good. Unhindered trade between nations is good. Trashing allies and their soldiers who have come to help us is not good. Talking about our allies in Afghanistan, Trump said, "We've never needed them. They'll say they sent some troops to Afghanistan, and they did. They stayed a little back, a little off the front lines." Not only is that extremely disrespectful for the guys who lost their lives fighting in a war that they weren't even obligated to be a part of, Denmark, coincidentally, is the only coalition nation that has the same level of casualties per capita as the US and UK. So basically saying they're cowards is just not it. And saying that he isn't sure they would come to our aid if required is historically false. But Trump is reducing the likelihood that they'll come to our aid if we need it. Swedish Deputy Prime Minister Ebba Busch told CNN trust has been truly damaged, and this will take time to repair. So for all of this, what are we really getting? We already have essentially complete military access. So if Trump wants to use Greenland as part of his Golden Dome, I don't think the Danish government would mind. And the Danish government has already rejected Russian and Chinese advances in the country, as their defense chairman said.
We have protected Greenland since 1380, and we have kept the Chinese and Russians completely out of Greenland. They're not there at all. They don't own anything. They don't control anything up there. They don't have any activities. They don't have a consulate. There's barely a Chinese restaurant in Greenland. They're really not there. We've kept them completely out.
If Russia or China did decide to move on Greenland, the US would have to respond in any case, whether or not we're administratively controlling the country, because Denmark alone cannot defend itself against those major powers. So why add the administrative and cost burden onto the US if A, Greenlanders don't generally want to become part of the US, B, we have the ability to put whatever military forces and equipment there now, and C, we'll have to defend it regardless in the case of an invasion. Some are pointing to the vast natural resources that Greenland has in oil, precious metals, and rare earth elements found under the ice, and the US should take advantage of that. But US investment does not require territorial control, and those resources are not as accessible as people are saying. First, we're talking about mining in the Arctic. The harsh conditions make general operations and building the required infrastructure much more difficult and costly. And second, Greenland doesn't have that much infrastructure built. Investment in roads, power generation, and seaport expansions would have to be done to make large-scale mining operations viable. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it, but coordinating and cost-sharing with the EU can benefit both of us while strengthening our relationships and keeping China, who's already been looking at Greenland's minerals, out of the picture. Long story short, transferring territorial control of Greenland from Denmark to the US is not necessary. I wouldn't be mad if it happened through mutual agreement, and there may be some advantages to the US having it, but the international drama that has unfolded over the past few weeks and the mistrust that has been sown between us and our allies is not worth anything that could be gained, unless the administration knows something crazy that the public doesn't. And while Denmark may not have as much of a reason to care about Greenland as they're putting on, that doesn't matter. It's their territory. Without it, they lose their biggest leverage at the table with larger powers like China, Russia, and the US, something which is unique for a small state like Denmark. And while they may have historically leveraged the territory to justify spending less towards NATO, since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, even that hasn't been the case. There are many things the US could be and should be doing to create more influence and bringing more nations into the American hegemonic fold. And Trump has done some good things in the foreign policy realm, but thrashing economic markets and pushing important allies away into the welcoming arms of the CCP over a piece of ice we already have full national security access to may be one of the dumbest political plays in recent memory. Hopefully, some sort of agreement comes to fruition in the near future so the US and EU can put this nonsense behind them and move on to more pressing issues. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think down in the comments. If you enjoyed, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.